Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Tuesday, April 27th, 2021. And here is our top story. The European Union and other governments begin regulating ESG investments. Well, joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Bob Colley. He's the principal and founder of Colley ESG. Bob, great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Jeff.
Yeah, I hope things are going well in the UK, and looks like the sun is shining bright behind you. Let's start with, we're going to talk today about the EU and other governmental entities regulating ESG. First, why would governments look to regulate this type of investment? Because we already have regulation around investments.
Yeah. So really, if you look at it from the regulator's point of view, there's a couple of different ways that you can try to get the end result you want. So you can either say we're going to force people to do the things we want. So if you say there's too much pollution, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, say, which we do, you can say you're not allowed to do that, but then you have to police it. And you have to build the infrastructure to stop people doing the things that you want. So if regulation is just about forcing people to do the things that you want them to do, when really that's what they want to do, but you're forcing them to behave differently, it is quite a difficult thing to do from the regulator's point of view. But what works even more effectively sometimes is if the regulator is able to shift the incentives. So financially, if people have an interest in reducing pollution, if I'm better off, if I'm able to invent ways to store carbon, if I'm able to invent ways to produce vehicles which emit less, all concrete, all the many different ways that modern life produces pollution and other bad side effects. If we can align the financial incentives to the outcome we want, suddenly you're not working against markets, you're working with markets. And so what the regulators are trying to do is to find ways to co-opt markets to the ends that they're trying to achieve. In this case, a more environmentally friendly economic model, for example, or better social justice, for example. That's another big part of ESG, slightly different issue. But again, it's a goal that regulators are pursuing. And if you can align the market's incentive behind those goals, then you start to create good outcomes and the markets start acting with you instead of against you.
Yeah, and specifically, I think the reason why I had reached out to you is about this EU, I guess, constraints around, not constraints, parameters around what is sustainable, what is an ESG type of investment. First question, Bob, around this is, what's been the reaction from people like yourself within the industry to seeing these are regulations, and I think they're still not final because there's still some outstanding issues around nuclear energy, nuclear plants with gas renewables. But what's been the overall reaction from the industry?
Yeah, on this one, it's been a long time coming. It was flagged a few years ago, and it's part of a series of changes that the EU are making. And so what just came out a few days ago were some of the details filling in the gaps around, as you say, what they call the taxonomy, which is just another way of saying the way that they're naming products. Are you allowed to call your product a green product or a sustainable product or whatever? And if we want to get down into the weeds, there's been some grumbling about what exactly is being classified as green and what isn't. So there's definitely wrangling over some of the details. But the overall direction of saying we need more standard labeling, we need more standard disclosures from companies, we need to all be talking the same language, is something that's pretty widely accepted. It is very hard to really get anywhere in a field like this if everybody is using the same word in different ways. We're not going to achieve a lot then. So the idea that we need something that's closer to a standard in terms of the terminology, I think is pretty much accepted and does make a lot of sense.
Bob, how this regulation and in other places as well, really trying to address what's called greenwashing, which is, I guess, a term which basically means you're not doing what you say you're doing, or you're not really living up to the standards that you say you're trying to adhere to. In your, and I just saw something over the weekend, $1.6 trillion or $1 trillion here in the U.S. in ESG or ESG type assets. I don't know if that's just U.S. or maybe it's the entire globe. That's a lot of money. How prevalent, just based on your anecdotal evidence, is quote unquote greenwashing? Is it something that people need to be concerned about? Are people jumping into the fray to just get a little piece of the action, get some of that $1 trillion of new asset flow?
My personal view on this is the term greenwashing implies that people are deliberately going out of their way to mislead. And so they're sticking a label on something which is just not sustainable at all. And while it's possible that there's a little bit of that, I don't think that's the real issue that we have here. What's much more common is people that are doing something that's maybe well-intentioned but not particularly deep or doesn't go very far. So it's not so much that they're going in with the intent to mislead, but maybe that they're overstating what they're doing, or they're really not producing the highest quality of products. And so again, some of the ways that people are addressing this is saying, let's have more transparency into what you're actually doing. You have to tell us what your policies are. You have to tell us how you're approaching the different objectives that you say you have, whether they're social, whether they're environmental, whether it's to do with greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's to do the oceans, whatever it is. We want more transparency onto that. So I think the term greenwashing can kind of be a little bit emotive. It's whereas really what it's about is we need to know what people are doing. We need more transparency, and that way consumers can make a choice. As an investor, you can say, yeah, I do support the goals that this investment manager has. I think that what they're doing makes a lot of sense, and it aligns with how I think investment should be carried out. And another investment product, you might say, that's just not for me. That's for people that see the world differently than I do, and I don't want to go there. But you're not able to make that decision if there isn't transparency, if you don't know exactly what that manager is doing and what the product is being built on.
Yeah, I like that you bring up transparency. And I think this is not only important, it's important in general when it comes to financial products. And we see this not only in SRI or ESG, the need there, but we've also seen it in hedge funds, or at least a direction to do this with hedge funds, other alternative investments. Because when you have more transparency, you kind of, in a way, give up the secret sauce. I mean, you have to give a lot more information. What's the likelihood, even given these regulations, which it seems like the industry kind of has embraced? I think people want some level of reporting. What's the likelihood that we could see this level of transparency such that as an average investor, I might be able to go and say, okay, well, they're not investing in guns. They're also not investing in ammunition. They're not investing in the springs that go in the guns. They're not investing in steel, right? You've got to be able to kind of peel back all those layers. Long question, but what's the likelihood we get there?
There's an arms race on this. I think that as you have more information that's available, the world gets more complex. So it's harder to then interpret that information, and sometimes you've got so many numbers that you can't actually see. It's like the disclosures in these financial products where you've got an inch thick prospectus, and is that, it's disclosure, but is it transparency? Because who's reading that inch thick prospectus of all the disclosures and information that's there? So definitely the direction that we're going in is towards more information being available, and that's the way of the world in general. But how to make sense of that information and take that data and turn it into actually useful and usable information so that investors can make better decisions. It is going to be a case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back as we try to find a way to make that data actually useful and usable.
Yeah, really important. And I want to get to that in our second segment. When we come back, we'll talk more about the governmental regulation of ESG, what's it mean, and what it means for employers, plan sponsors, allocators in terms of understanding what they're exactly getting into. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score, a credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking to Bob Colley. He is principal and founder of Colley ESG. Bob, thanks as always for sticking around with us for a second segment.
No problem.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking with you so much, and really informative and really an important topic given all the assets that are flowing into these types of investments. We talked about the why, the who, the how around government regulation, the need for transparency. Let's talk about maybe what's interesting, I think, from your perspective, when you're sitting in these meetings. What about allocators? So people like yourself who are helping vet and evaluate these investment products on behalf of a client. But the clients, what are they taking away from all these regs? The EU reg, the Department of Labor reg, what's it all mean?
It's just a lot more for them to juggle with it. The life of being a trustee at one of these institutional investment funds or at an endowment foundation, wherever it is, it's only got more complex over time, and I don't think that's going to change. What you have is a world that's moving faster than ever, that's more connected, and is simply more complex. So that's the nature of the game, and I think as ESG comes into the picture, it definitely adds another dimension. It makes it harder. You're having to take a lot more things into account. They're important things to take into account, but it definitely adds another layer of complication into the life of the allocator.
Yeah, and are you seeing, so typically here in the States, and I imagine it's similar in the UK and other parts of the European Union and all around the world, is you have a generalist, a consultant who's a generalist that kind of keeps you around the regulatory framework. They look at the plan generally. But someone like yourself who is, you were a generalist, you worked at a very prominent, I'm not going to mention them, but a very prominent research firm guiding sponsors. But are you seeing more of hiring people like yourself who are ESG experts, just like you have alternative manager experts, hedge fund manager experts, private equity, et cetera, et cetera? Is that really kind of the future of this niche?
I don't know if it's the future, it's the current trend.
Okay.
This industry has always had a very interesting pendulum swinging between the generalist and the specialist. And in a world where everybody's a generalist, there's a lot of advantage to being a specialist because you can develop a deeper expertise. And so we see these big trends sometimes towards greater specialization. And we saw that with small cap and international and everything as asset classes proliferated. We saw a trend towards specialization, but that's not a one-directional trend, because what happens is once everything's become too specialized, you lose the big picture. And then the generalist comes back, and you see that pendulum swing back towards a generalist. So definitely the case that at the moment around ESG, but because it's such a fast developing field and so deep and complicated, I think there is a trend towards specialization. I wouldn't guarantee that trend will continue forever, because at some point, people need to see the big picture. And ESG, at the end of the day, is just investment. It's just part of that same investment process, and it has to be part of the mainstream eventually. So yes, there's more specialization, but don't expect that trend to continue forever.
And that investment policy statement, that is like the bedrock by which every investment in a retirement plan or an endowment, foundation, pension plan is benchmarked or monitored, I should say, bad word, monitored. What does this mean, this disclosure, these regulations, what does this mean to when you're heading into those meetings? You're talking about that IPS, that investment policy statement, these 6 rules, like the EU, you've got to satisfy 5 out of the 6 criteria in order to be considered sustainable. Is that something that gets embedded into the investment policy statement if you are operating in the EU?
Depending on the exact country you're in, then yes, there's been regulations here for a while, and that require you to say what your policy towards ESG investment is and sustainability in general is. There are more regulations that are coming in about disclosure, measuring your impact, for example, is what are the effects, not just the financial effects, but the non-financial effects of the investment decisions you're making. So that's certainly the direction here. And I would expect, certainly under this administration, that they're looking at that closely and seeing whether something similar would make sense for the US. Clearly, it won't be the exact same regulations, but the principle of better reporting of impact is certainly one which I think has a lot of legs to it.
Yeah, and when you look maybe into the near future, we're talking about the European Union. That's all the European countries. What about other parts of the world? What about Asia, China, Japan, Africa, those great countries, South America? We don't talk enough about, we try to do it on this program, we don't talk enough about those great retirement programs, but do you see the same types of regulatory guidance? We have something similar here in the US. The Department of Labor looked at ESG and its implications for fiduciaries. But do you see that kind of picking up? Do people look at what the EU are doing and saying, we should do something similar? We should have a similar regulatory framework?
Yeah, this is certainly a global issue. Well, sustainability in general is a global concern. So ESG investing, which is part of that wider trend, is something where we're seeing everywhere in the world increasing interest, and investment is a global game now. Really, it's the firms are global, and then the strategies are global as well. I would say that the EU has deliberately set out and is trying to be the leader. The EU wants to be the one which is blazing the trail and defining, and that other people might be following in their footsteps. So the EU is probably the one to look at for where the rest of the world may be following. But there's interesting things happening, as you say, in a lot of places. I think the US is fascinating, partly because the context within the US is probably more polarized than in a lot of other countries. You see a little bit of the polarization elsewhere, but not to the same extent that it is in the US. And that creates special challenges in order to get consensus behind any changes. And really, when you're doing something that's big, to be effective, you want there to be a big social acceptance of it and big consensus behind it. It's a little bit harder to achieve in the US, not impossible. So I think there are different flavors around the world. The EU currently in the lead as far as regulation goes. But it is a global trend, and I think we're going to see a lot of developments in a lot of places over the next few years.
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to watch. I mean, $1 trillion of assets in Q1 here, either it's in the States or around the world. That's a lot of money. That means a lot of focus. And just like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency getting a lot of attention, I think we're going to see more of that. Bob, it is always a pleasure chatting with you. I love the analysis, and it's always great catching up. We'll look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
It's wonderful. I look forward to it. Thanks, Jeff.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, and of course, our website. We're back again tomorrow, so until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited, and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.